أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم من همزه ونفخه ونفثه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So today, inshallah, again, just like before, just like always, we're going to do a quick check-in, reflections, kind of see how everyone's doing, what's going on, any epiphanies people have had, anything that you've noticed in the past few days, anything that you've done differently, anything that has been useful in terms of what we've talked about before, anything like that. Let's go over this right here, and I wanted to have this sort of like open for sort of like come up with a few things that we normally think of, right? So for example, what are some things that our minds about how things are supposed to work out? So for example, this idea that if I do really good in school, in high school, then I should be able to get into a good college, right? So somebody might have this mindset. Somebody might have this mindset that I'm going to be able to get certain thing, to be able to do certain things, to be able to get certain things based on what my effort is alone, right? That if I do all the steps, then I'm supposed to get the end result that I am looking for. So whether it's getting a particular job, whether it's or whether it's getting into a certain school, whether it's whatever, right? And so this is something that we sort of adopt and we sort of internalize. And when we internalize it, we become, we think that this is how life is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen that way, then we feel either that we didn't do what we were supposed to, or we sort of become stubborn and we sort of continue trying to figure out how we can get whatever we want to get. So whatever that might be, we start doing that. When things don't go as we want to, we get worried and we get stressed. We get upset, and this is where problems happen. And we went over this a little bit last time, so I wanted to get sort of think about some things that might come up in people's lives that, or some of the truths that people sort of adopted as truth, and then like they get into situations. So, for example, um, parents might have this understanding that if their kids do really well in school and they spend all this time studying and spend their time, doing extracurricular activities, and they spend their time doing whatever else, right? That at the end of the day, they're going to be able to be successful in life. They're going to be happy in life. They're going to be, doing really well. They're going to be really well off, and so on. So this is something that they've adopted as their truth, and they run their life according to that. So for themselves and for their kids, they feel that this is going to be how success is going to happen. That if you focus from 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, you get up, you go to school, at least before COVID-19, and you spend your entire time in school. Then you come home after maybe sports or after maybe like, after school clubs or whatever, or maybe not, but you just come home and you have some, then you start working on your homework and on your assignments and so on. And you have lots of homework, lots of things to do and stuff. So you spend your entire like day, you might break for lunch, dinner or something like that, but you spend the rest of the time just studying and studying and studying until 2 o'clock in the morning. And then you have to repeat the cycle every single day. But as parents, we might say, for example, okay, well, this is going to help my kid become successful. And this might happen from the point from when a kid is, let's say, 3 years old. We're sort of like thinking about getting this person, what preschool they might go to and so on. So when they get to 5, 6, 7 years old and stuff, we sort of like started putting them in those schools, and we sort of started doing this, and we sort of put them in that path until age 18, for example. Then they get to high school, and then after high school, they get into college and they have to, you know, make sure that they're doing good so that they can graduate with a nice degree, and then they can get to work. And when they get to work, they know that they have to keep climbing because they need to, you know, rise to the next position and above, and they have to keep going up and up and up and so on. And so this is something that makes us, or this is a thought process that drives us, right? And there's nothing necessarily completely wrong with this, because we're supposed to do some of these things, right? We're supposed to make sure that we have something mapped out for us and so on. But the problem is that we sort of over immerse ourselves into it, and we over rely on those things alone to sort of like help us in life. And sometimes we have our own cultural baggage that comes in. And when I say baggage, what I mean is, like, you know, our perspectives because of what our surroundings, our cultures, our, you know, our relatives, our families, our extended, you know, social group has sort of adopted as truths, and sort of we've sort of internalized too, and so we sort of take that and then sort of apply that in our lives. So, is spending your entire day necessarily good when it comes to just immersing yourself in studying and, like, you know, preparing for what's going to come up next and so on, in terms of school and college and, like, you know, work and so on? Is that necessarily a bad thing, or is that, like, you know, okay thing, or how do we look at it, right? So we're going to go over that inshallah in the next slide, but for this, just keep this in mind. How do you think that impacts a person? And a child growing up in this context, how does that impact that person? Does it conform with the reality? You know, is this narrative something that is meshing well with reality, that it is sort of working with reality, or is it something different? Or is it sort of conflicting with it? Are people, when they get money, for example, are they happier? Are they able to sort of like relax a little bit and stuff? Does it have some sort of like benefit and stuff that was being sought after, right? So keep that in mind. So with that, let me open it up again for you guys to see if you have any comments. Is there anything that it comes to your mind when it comes to um, these truths, these kind of truths that people have adopted? It might not be something that you've adopted, but it might, or it might be, right? But something that is like small t truth, something that we sort of use to drive us, sort of like we've accepted as the correct way of doing things, and we can navigate according to that, whether it's in our dealings with each other, whether it's our dealings with our families, with our friends, with our associates, whatever it is. Just sort of like what sort of derives us. Do you guys have any truths that you know of, that you've taken for yourself, or that you know that other people have taken for themselves? I mentioned one where parents, you know, might have taken this truth as a thing that's as a sort of framework for themselves in terms of how they deal with their kids, how they look at life, and so on.
I think one thing for me is I noticed from like watching TV, nowadays a lot of TV shows are based on people at work, like whether they're a doctor, a police officer, or just in the office or something, and they make life out to seem like it's something. They make work seem like it's something that it's not, and it was starting to create a narrative in my brain, like when I look at my own work environment and like what goes on there, and then I see like all this exciting stuff happen on TV. Like it makes me think like my career is it's just like boring, and it's never going to be as good as other types of careers. But in reality, like they just depict work in a very different way.
Okay,
So
good.
yeah.
So you mentioned pretty much your perception was influenced by not social media, like popular culture, right? And then
Yeah.
you've seen, like, you might have seen something on TV or movies or whatever, and so those things sort of made it seem like life is going to be like that when you get to work. But when you actually
Right.
got to work, it was sort of not like that, right? It was like, this is not what I was expecting. So maybe I'm the one who, something's wrong with me or something like that, because you sort of accepted that as a truth. And maybe not completely, but at least, like, you know, that perception was sort of like sitting there in your mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
it's
just like,
really not just work, it's like anything. Like you see people's relationships and friendships and just like all kinds of experiences that they have, which is like, blown out of proportion just for the sake of a show.
yeah, exactly. So like we talked about, the world view that you might have, what it's composed of, your perception, what it's composed of, right? Where does where does it come from? And we mentioned many different things. So popular culture, that definitely is one of those things that can really influence how you perceive things. For example, if you are giving your kids the like if your babysitter, right, is a like a tablet or like the TV or something like that, and they're just like sitting there just watching that stuff and that's the babysitter, right? Then you can imagine like this, that's the immersion that they have, and so whatever they watch is gonna sort of shape their perception of how reality should be. And as they grow up, instead of learning like the tarbiyah or etiquette or manners and stuff in terms of how to interact with people and so on, and just overall like the world view that they have, a lot of that is going to be based on whatever they were immersed in, right? Parents can be those influencing uh, factors, but if they're not there, or if they're sort of letting something else babysit their kids, what happens is that that babysitter then sort of influence their kids' perception of how reality should be. So then when we come, for example, and we see that our kids are not being respectful, for example, with us, right? So then we get upset because we're like, this is not how it's supposed to be. And so there's like a disconnect that happens. For example, many of the Disney Channel shows, for example, or like other shows for kids, a lot of times you'll see that the kids have a conflict, that the parents, the kids have a conflict with the parents. And so the parents initially say, no, don't do this or whatever, whatever, but they're shown as if they don't know any better. They're sort of being too harsh or whatever. They're being prudish or something like that. But at the end of the day, you realize that, or in the movies or in these shows, you see that at the end of the day, the parents are the ones that come and apologize to their kids because the kids were always right and so on. So a kid that's immersed in this reality, right? Because when you watch something, you sort of become immersed in it as if you're kind of like there with whatever is going on. Um, so when the kid is immersed in this reality, this is the mindset that they're having. So there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, that whoever من لم يرحم صغيرنا ويعرف حق كبيرنا فليس منا. That whoever does not know, um, whoever does not have mercy on our young ones, and whoever does not know the rights of our elders, then that person is not from us. That person is not from us, right? So in this case, there's this mention of وَيَعْرِفْ حَقَّ كَبِيرِنَا, that this person knows, or in this case, it's a negative, so it's like this person does not know uh, the rights of our elders. If the person is seeing something where the rights of our elders are not being progressed forward, they're not being shown, and actually the opposite is being shown, then this kid is going to learn exactly that. And so when they talk to you, they're not going to treat you as if they are like as if you are their superior and their elders and so on. They're going to treat you as if they are superior to you in a way, because that's what the movies are showing, that's what the TV shows are showing. They're not teaching respect and kindness and generosity and stuff necessarily between your relationship between your parents and you and so on. They're not teaching that. So a kid who's immersed in that reality takes that as their reality. Likewise, when it comes to us, for example, and in the workplace, or hanging out with people that have a different worldview than us, and let's say that in this case, that worldview, for example, might be a negative one, right? So, for example, the social culture of drinking and having boyfriends and girlfriends and stuff before marriage and so on, right? And like doing those kinds of things, kind of going all the way out. If this is the norm that we're surrounded by, if this is the world that we're surrounded by, if these are the people that we're hanging out with, our kids are hanging out with, then it's very very likely that our kids or we ourselves are going to sort of become used to that, if not assimilated to it, right? We might assimilate into it ourselves. And so what that means is uh, when when we are so surrounded by all this stuff, we sort of start okaying some of these things unless there's an active voice telling us, no, this is not okay, right? And so we become desensitized and we sort of adapt to it and so on, and that's that. Now, for some of the people that have, Deen as their reference point, and this is their main thing, and this has been all their life, for them it may be a little bit easier to sort of resist that, right? But for kids who grow up on, watching like TV as their, as your babysitter, or being um, uh, being on the tablet, watching all these shows and so on, as their um, as their like sort of as what they're immersed in. And then as time goes on, when they go out, like from morning until night, they're spending their time being around um, people who don't take the same like standard Islam as, the parents do, for example, or other people. So they don't take this as their standard. Then the kids are sort of going to become exactly like everyone else. And so when you tell them to pray, for example, you're going to find resistance, because that's not their truth. That's not their truth. That's your truth. And so why does it, like, why should they do it, right? You, so this environment that you put your kids in, this environment that we sort of put ourselves in, has such an impact on us that it starts shaping what we perceive as reality, and what's good and what's not good, right? And in the current society, by and large, like the modern, society, for example, uh, there is this push towards secularism. There's this push towards sort of distancing yourself from deen in general, like that standard of uh, conformity to specific boundaries that we have in Islam, right? There's this sort of push against that, and so when our when we are immersed in this environment and we don't have something to sort of anchor us back to a very specific standard, right? Then we sort of start getting really comfortable in that environment. We sort of uh, sort of become distant from the things that we should be doing, and that starts causing problems um, in terms of our affairs, when it comes to our small t truths compared to what capital T truths really are. Allah says in the Quran, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. And in this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that He knows about whatever He created. Like, why would He not know about what He created? Because He's the one who created it, right? And uh, He is Latif, and He is Khabir. So in this case, He's extremely aware and kind when it comes to His creation. He knows exactly what's going on, why it's going on, and so on. So He knows anything that happened in the past, anything that could have happened in the past, what's happening at the moment, anything that will happen in the future, what could have happened otherwise in the future. He knows all those details. And accounting for all those things, right, and more, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us specific guidance. So He sort of told us that if you do this is going to happen. If you do this, something else is going to happen, and so on. Understanding this, it helps us, the people that explore this, kind of navigate forward. But I'm going to stop over here. I'm going to see if you guys have something else that you guys thought of. So we talked about, parents having a certain mindset, this sort of reality outside of us. If we don't have a standard, then that reality outside of us is gonna, that reality meaning that culture, or whatever we want to call it, right? The environment that we immerse ourselves in, that sort of shapes our perception of how reality works and how things work and so on. So we mentioned popular culture. What are some other things that we said these are like, things that influence our truths, and so we sort of mentioned some of those truths. But what are some other truths that we've sort of adopted? And I want you to start thinking about, where the problems sort of stem from. And we talked about that last time. Um, when there's a disconnect, right? We sort of like think that our truths, whatever we think is right, and that's it. But we sort of don't really check if that's reality or not. So what are some other things that people sort of adopted, and they sort of pass on, whether it's culture or whether it's whatever it might be? So just some other things that you have in mind that people have taken, for example, as your choice.
I think it's an interesting question because pretty much everything that we do every day is based on small t truths. So I'm not sure how to actually pinpoint the truth, how to answer your question.
Okay. Uh, okay. Let's do this. So let's talk about let's talk about something that is common among people, right? And let's talk about, for example, gender related, like yeah, let's talk about gender relations, or let's talk about, like, this idea of marriage and what marriage should be like and so on. um, what the society sort of wants us to be in terms of uh, our achievements, our accomplishments, and so on, like pretty much all that stuff. So this is relating to, for example, self-esteem issues, um, in terms of what we do when it comes to work, and like getting money and why we get money and so on, right? So things like that, if you want to go into that a little bit. So for example, as you're thinking about it, let me give you an example. Let's say that a person is making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens their door in terms of finding them a great job so they can make lots of money, right? What is the person doing in this case right here? Like, what are some things that could be going on in the mind of a person who's making such a dua?
Well, if somebody's making a very specific dua, then they may already have like an image in their mind of what they're expecting, whether it's a certain position at a certain place, and then what they will be doing with that money, and they envision themselves maybe climbing, up through the ranks and becoming more and more successful. And if those dua are not actually answered in the way that they are asking for or they're envisioning, then there can be great disappointment and maybe a feeling of failure on their own part.
Mm-hmm. So there is some sort of initial idea of what they want at the end of the day, and how that could help them in whatever goals that they want to achieve, right? So let's assume that a person wants to be happy, and they're making dua that, oh Allah, give me, like, let me have this particular job because it's going to pay me this much money, and so on and so on, whatever, and I'm going to be able to get this house, and I'm going to be able to get married, and I'm going to be able to do this and this and this. Let's say a person is making this dua. Now, as they're making this dua, like we said in the beginning, they have this sort of initial perception of what goodness looks like, what happiness looks like for themselves, but also for other people. So they have this image that's already painted, and they're sort of seeking that exactly how they want on their own terms, and so they start making a particular dua. Now, because they assume that this, whatever image that they have, is the way that it's like how it's supposed to be, that this is going to give them happiness, when they make that dua and it doesn't come to be exactly how they want it, in fact something else happens, or maybe the opposite happens, that they get, they don't get that job or whatever, then in that case they sort of give up, and they get really upset, and they sort of start questioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they sort of projected their own small t truth onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to everyone else, because they wanted reality to look like what they wanted to look like, and they wanted, in the back of their mind, whether they thought about it or not, they were sort of trying to project the reality on everyone else, meaning they wanted everyone else to be okay with whatever that truth was that they had themselves adopted. So if I'm making dua that, oh Allah, for example, make this person, like, give me like 100 on my test or whatever, right? If I make that particular dua, then I sort of want the other person to sort of do what I want them to do. I want to control them in the way that I want to paint the reality by using my own paintbrush. And I don't want anybody else to have their own wishes and desires and stuff, except whatever matches what I want, right? And so when that doesn't happen, because that's not realistic, right? Then in that case, we sort of get upset. Okay, so another thing, for example, would be like we were talking about marriage related stuff. So you have a very particular image of who you want to get married to and how they should be, and what everything should be like, and so on. And so you get married with that perception in mind. And when things are not going exactly the way that you wanted them to go, then you sort of start having conflicts with your spouse, with your and then if you have kids, you have conflicts with your kids, and all these things that are happening, that start happening in your life, that are not according to what you wanted, then they sort of become sources of your conflict. In this case, if you wanted your kids to become a doctor, or an engineer and lawyer, and I am being stereotypical in this case, but I'm not pointing any fingers to anybody, but let's say that that's the perception that we want to have, right? So the parent might be thinking that if my kid becomes this and this and this, right, that they're gonna sort of become accepted by society, they're gonna be good to go, they're gonna have fun in they're gonna settle down, they're gonna enjoy their life, and they're not gonna have to worry about anything else, right? So they're sort of assumed that every person is gonna be happy being a doctor, engineer, or lawyer just because they're going to be able to pay their bills and they're going to have a big house and so on, then that somehow gives them happiness. Is that really conforming to reality? Is everyone going to be happy with being a doctor, engineer, lawyer? And is that something that actually is going to help us move forward in life, like as a society? You know, if the entire society was built off of lawyers and engineers and doctors, right? Is that good? Is that something that, you know, society should be like? Like everyone in the world has these three options.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because
We need a lot of other things.
yeah, we need a lot of other things, right? Like we definitely need lawyers and doctors and engineers, yes, but we also need teachers to teach them how to become lawyers and teachers and engineers, right? If there's no teachers, they're not going to have any lawyers, teachers, and engineers. Lawyers, engineers, and doctors and stuff, right? Yeah, and if we didn't have people that knew how to construct buildings, for example, um, we wouldn't have law firms, we wouldn't have like hospitals, we wouldn't have any of those things, right? So those are things that are necessary. And if we didn't have people that knew IT work, for example, then I wouldn't be having this conversation with you guys over here, right? So we don't understand sometimes that our very restrictive framework or mental framework that we've sort of adopted as like how reality should be can can have a very detrimental impact if it was actually to become reality, right? And so we sort of want everything to go our way. We want to have this sort of control, but when things don't go our way, we get upset. And a lot of times, whatever is not beneficial for the rest of mankind, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is not going to let it happen, right? At the end of the day, and I want you to understand what I just said over here. So Islam comes as a way of benefiting everyone, whether it's human beings, jinn, whatever else that exists. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala made Islam be that thing that is beneficial to everything. It's supposed to call to everything that's good and beneficial. It's supposed to push people away from anything that's harmful to them, whether they realize it or not, whether it's immediate or delayed. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala intends to push away harm and to bring any benefit that can come to society, to the entire creation. The scholars of Islam, they spent a lot of time thinking about the objectives of what Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala sent down. What are the benefits of, for example, praying 5 times a day? What are the benefits of um, assigning certain roles to certain people, for example? What are certain benefits of implementing certain rules in daily life, for example, or in society? What are some benefits of that, right? So the scholars sat down over the centuries and they started discussing these things, and then they started extracting and sort of discussing. And this is something that's been accumulated over the last 1400 years, obviously more than 1400 years, where the Muslim scholars all over the world, because Islam spread all over the world, spent all they spent so much time sort of just documenting their experiences. They thought about they went into theoretical stuff, they went into practical stuff, they went to everything, and then as the sum of all of this research and understanding, they came up with this understanding that Islam brings everything that's beneficial to creation and puts away everything that's harmful to creation. And among those things that they sort of came up with was the understanding of what they call the five essentials within the framework of the higher objectives of Sharia. These are the lowest level, meaning in this case you have to go through this level before you go to the next level. And this is in the framework of Maqasid al-Sharia, which is higher objectives of Sharia. And the lowest level is called Dururiyat. These are the essential fives. And then above that, you have what they call hajiyat. These are things that are necessary, but they're not as necessary as the essentials. So we're going to focus just on these 5 essentials. And these 5 essentials, they discussed some of them, mentioned 6, but some of them mentioned 5, sort of combined the two of them, so they became 5, right? One of them is the protection of deen. The protection of deen is where, because deen sort of brings everything else after, like everything was contained in the deen, so you have to protect the deen, right? And then another thing is the protection of life. Protection of life is important. So this is something that they realize that Islam is sort of encouraging, and sort of like that this is the objective of the Sharia, to make sure that life is preserved, because life has value and has meaning and it's sacred and so on, and so it has it has to be preserved as much as possible, to every extent that's possible. And then another thing is the preservation of lineage slash honor. Some people differentiate between the two, some of them combine the two. And so making sure that the lineages are protected, that if somebody is your son, then they are your son, that nobody else can have claim over your son, and nobody sort of can like say that my parents are somebody who they're not, right? So there's like a preservation of lineages. So it goes all the way back to whoever the, sort of, you could trace backwards and downwards, but it also gives responsibilities for the people that are in those lineages. So for example, parents have responsibility to their kids, right? And this makes sure that the kids have protection, they have the things that they need, and as they're growing up, they have the things that they like they're going to need in terms of well-being, in terms of growth and development, in terms of safety and security and so on. All of these things parents can provide, and so that's how that sort of naturally puts stuff in their parents as well. Generally speaking, that sort of makes the parents, and I'm saying generally speaking because there are obviously exceptions where there's like abuse and neglect and all that stuff. So that's where the parents sort of like did not do what they were supposed to be doing, and so they went against their natural disposition of taking care of their kids and so on, right? But generally, the parents have this tendency to be protective of their kids, sort of like want something for their kids, to try to train their kids and so on. So that sometimes sort of put this in the people's within the people already, sort of program them in a way to look out for their kids and so on naturally, right? Whether they do it in the right way or not, that's a different story, but that's a different topic. But the point is over here that there is this tendency to do that, right? And so that's that. And so when it comes to the kids are supposed to make sure that they have a certain interaction with their parents, they have a demeanor with their parents that's respectful and kind and appreciative and so on, because there is this understanding that the parents took care of them and so on. Now, this is one of the things that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala encourages, right? Another thing that goes within the same frame, within the same aspect, or within the same category, right, is making sure that people are not slandering other people. People are not being rude to other people. People are not mocking and insulting other people. So you'll see this also mentioned in the Quran many times. There's a mention of direct mocking, insulting. That you're not allowed to do that, as you see on Surah Al-Hujurat. But also other places when the Prophet ﷺ mentions that about a believer and a Muslim, about how other people are safe from it, right? Other people are safe from this person's like harm, physical harm, but also like verbal accusations and harms and so on. So this stuff right here is also indicating that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala intended for us to look out for each other, to take care of each other, to be nice to each other, and so on, right? On top of that, you have this thing about like how you interact with each other in terms of favors. If you do a favor on somebody, you're not allowed to you're not supposed to recall favors on people, right? Like, if somebody is interacting with you a certain way, you're like, do you remember I did that once with, to you and stuff, and you were in need and stuff, and now you're treating me like this? Allah Subhanahu wa Taala does not want you to recall favors like that, because if he wanted to, he could have recalled all these favors on you too. Every verse in the Quran, every hadith that the Prophet told us could have been about how Allah Subhanahu wa Taala did this and this and this and this and this and this and that, and then like all these other things and stuff, right? And it could have been just that. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala does not do that much. He tells you certain instructions, he tells you to do all that stuff, instead of just recalling his favors. He could have done that, right? He could have recalled all the favors that he's done, and every single day that he gives us an extra second of every second to live, that's another favor, right? And all the resources that are available to us or that sustain us for the next second, he could have done that, but he didn't do that, right? So Allah Subhanahu wa Taala made sure that he sort of gave us instructions to help us when it comes to how we should interact with each other in a way that we don't feel overwhelmed or stressed out or worried with, when it comes to each other, and we're not dealing with each other in a negative way that hurts each other, it hurts people and so on. So this is, and again, there's a lot more to that. For example, lineage also implies that, there should be marriages, they should be a certain way of marriages and so on. So everything is sort of like, protected and guarded and safe and so on. Everyone's rights are in the proper places. That if somebody feels, Allah Ta'ala knows that a parent, if they're taking care of their kids, they're going to feel a certain way. They're going to be like, they're sort of like, they're going to expect from their kids a certain treatment. They're going to expect from their kids certain loyalty and trust and so on. They're going to expect some appreciation from their kids and so on, right? Because they look out for them and so on. So Allah Ta'ala, knowing this, He made it a right on the parents that the kids should treat them a certain way. Okay? So Allah Ta'ala knew what the expectations of people are going to be based on what they do. So Allah Ta'ala naturally then put certain rights in place for that. And so the kids are they're expected to treat their parents a certain way, right? That's something that is sort of meshing with what people sort of would have naturally felt. Likewise, the kids needed some help and guidance and so on. So it became a right of the kids that the parents are supposed to teach them these things, right? And so giving them tarbiyah at a kid, teaching them how to navigate life and so on. This is something that Allah SWT made as a right of kids, so that the parents would be doing that, because the kids would have needed that. So this right here, these rights Allah SWT gave to different, the different people, different rights and so on. It was a way so that the people sort of do the things that are necessary to be done, and that are going to be, helpful in terms of moving forward in life and so on. So for example, instead of taking parents to when they get older to like a nursing home or something like that, leaving them there and forgetting about them and just maybe visiting them like once like every year or something like that, instead of that, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala wanted the kids to take care of their parents, especially the elder ones and stuff, right? So Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala mentions about how you should treat them, how you should talk to them and so on, especially when they get older and stuff, how you should make dua for them and so on. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala mentioned these things, and these are important things, because Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knew what the older parents, if they're 70, 80 years old, for example, or 60, 50 years old, how they're going to feel when it comes to their kids, how they used to take care of their kids, but the kids sort of like, turned away from them, and now they're in their own lives and stuff, and they sort of like forgot about their parents. So he knew that this is going to hurt the parents. And then these same kids that sort of, worked, sort of got immersed in their daily life or whatever, and they left their parents and so on, how they would, how these people are going to become themselves those same adults, those same like elder parents that are going to be themselves put into nursing homes and so on, and so how they're going to feel about their own kids and so on. So Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knew how much pain that could happen, and so Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala made sure that there was a system in place to address that before it happened, right? And so our conforming to those things that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave us is a way for us to sort of make sure that those harms don't take place, that we don't perpetuate those kinds of harms that otherwise would have been perpetuated. So that's that. Another thing that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, another category that is in this essential things that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has in the higher objectives, right, is the protection of wealth and property. And this is important because Islam actually encourages you to go out and seek money, for example, go out and like make money and stuff, earn your living and so on. In fact, it encourages you to have a good living. It encourages you so that you can have more money, so you can donate more and stuff, so you can live a comfortable life, so you can get away from the stresses of life and so on. So becoming a doctor or engineer or a lawyer to make a lot of money, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, in a way, anything that's going to help you in terms of getting to like a nice and comfortable place and stuff is encouraged in Islam, right? So let's say that for example, we know Uthman radiallahu anhu was very, very well off. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was very well off. Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu was very, very well off. And we know many of the people, like Imam Bukhari had like an estate that he inherited and stuff, so he was living off of that. Imam Abu Hanifa also, for example, he had his own business and he was making lots of money and stuff like that, so he wasn't dependent on anybody and stuff, right? So these are things that were, these are people that are famous people and stuff, and they lived a life where they had money and they were comfortable and so on. But the thing was that they didn't get attached to money as if this is the thing that makes everything work out in the end, right? But they used the money as a tool to get towards navigating life until they met Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, right? Until the angel of death came and took their soul and so on. This is what they use it as. They use it as a tool, not the end objective, right? There was a means to an end, but not the end itself, right? And so that right there is something that we can sort of readjust in our understanding of what our truths are. We can say, for example, that earning money is actually a great thing. You should earn money, right? Because you can donate more now. You can become, when you have money and stuff, you're not stressed out about things and stuff like that. You're sort of a little bit more comfortable. You can now focus on the things that you would like to do for the sake of Allah. Now, because you're not worried, about money, then you're gonna pray a little bit more relaxed and stuff. You're gonna be able to focus. You'll be able to focus more when it comes to praying, for example, right? You're gonna be able to sort of have a good interaction with your kids because you're not stressed out. You're not gonna, fight them and argue with them and stuff, or like yell at them and all that stuff, because you're more relaxed and stuff, right? So this is actually a good thing. You should be making more money if you can, stuff, right? At least trying it and stuff, right? That in itself is then a tool towards a higher objective, right? And so this is something that Sharia promotes. It actually, also protects it. So, for example, the cutting of the hand of a person who steals beyond a certain amount, right? That's to make sure that a person does not steal, because if they steal, then you're harming other people's rights and so on. But also, a person who's hard-earned money is there to help kind of stabilize them, sort of emotionally balance them and so on, and to make sure that the other relationships are good. If a person didn't have these things protected, anybody could come and take that stuff, then that defeats the whole point, right? And so that person is going to be always nervous, always stressed out, always worried about their money being taken away. So that's also going to cause that person stress, and when that stress is then going to lead them to not have good interaction with their family members and with other people and so on. And so that's not going to be a good thing for society. If everyone's worried always about what's going to happen into their wealth and property is going to be safe or not, whatever, then that's going to make them always on edge. And when you're on edge, you're more likely to snap. And when you snap, you're going to say things and stuff, and you're going to have a certain demeanor that's not going to be positive and helpful to the people around you, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want that, because that's a lot of harm. If everyone is thinking like that, everyone's on edge, then a society is on the verge of collapse. It's like it's pretty much like chaotic, right? Because everyone's gonna be snapping all day long and stuff, right? And so these are things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want. And so protection of wealth is then something that's very important, because it sort of harmonizes society. It makes it sort of manage things and stuff in a better way, because it's no longer worried about what could go wrong and stuff like that. So this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually encourages then, right? And there's actually many proofs and stuff. I'm intentionally not giving you all those proofs, because this is not, I'm not teaching you maqasid al-sharia and stuff like that. I'm not giving you deep fiqh, courses and stuff like that. I am just intending to show you some basic things, and if you would like to, you can go open the books of maqasid sharia, and they've actually, maqasid sharia is one of those things that has sort of kind of been worked on throughout the centuries. And many scholars wrote about this, and they gave a lot of proofs on this and stuff. And this is what I was talking about, how they reflected on the on the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over the centuries, and they sort of wrote about how they started realizing the benefits that Islam brings to society and stuff, right? And the harms that it sort of pushes you pushes away from society. And so we talked about um, uh, we talked about some of them, right? Of the five. Another one is intellect, protection of intellect. So, for example, alcohol is prohibited because it impacts your intellect, your judgment, your ability to kind of think straight and so on. So anything that has that hampering impact on your intellect, then that is prohibited, because as a society, if people started indulging in these vices, for example, and these things that are impacting your intellect, then you're gonna do things in these intoxicated states, for example, right? That you're gonna regret later on. And I don't need to give you examples of this, but when people do get into these kinds of things, it impacts them, and it impacts them negatively, and it impacts society as a whole when more people start doing that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that that doesn't happen. And then if you have people that are addicted to certain things and stuff, or they're sort of overcome by these negative factors in their intellect, then the way they interact with other people, their interaction with each other, the decisions that they make for themselves and for other people and so on, become hampered, and they become negatively impacted. And as a result of that, a lot of harm is spread throughout society, right? An alcoholic, for example, how he treats his son, or how they treat their sibling, for example, or how they treat their friends and family and so on, is going to be something that's not going to be positive, right? It's going to be, and about alcohol addiction and stuff, and drug addiction, and how that impacts societies and stuff. Again, I don't need to go into details and stuff, although I have a lot of examples. I have a lot of people, we work with a lot of we have a lot of cases where we have to go to we have youth, for example, that are hooked on drugs and stuff like that, and their lives are just falling apart and stuff like that. So we have to sit with them, we have to discuss with them, with their parents and so on, what's going on, how to kind of like get out of that situation and so on. So we have a lot of these cases. We have cases where people have gotten into difficult situations, between husband and wife and so on. So there's a lot of these issues that sort of so they're very, very common, but we're not really talking about them much. And I think we should definitely open these conversations up more. But what I'm saying over here, what my objective is, not to go into details about all this stuff. I'm just trying to give you like the information, the facts, the 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 capital T truths, right? Because then it helps you understand where your perception um, where your perceptions are sort of like misguided in a way, right? If they are indeed misguided, if they're following the truth or if they're aligned with it, that's great. Or sometimes you might deviate a little bit from the truth, right? For example, in this context of becoming a lawyer, engineer, doctor, essentially, if the fundamental principle over here was that we should all become more in tune, or sort of we should become like we should do the things that are going to help us in terms of financial stability, for example, or wealth, like not just stability, but like having a lot of money, for example. If that's the objective in the sense of helping us, or we're not always stressed out and worried, then that's a good thing. That's what Islam encourages us to do also, right? But what we do sometimes is sort of deviate a little bit away from it, just thinking that these are the only three things that we have to do, or there are only certain things that we can do and we shouldn't do and stuff, right? We have these things that sort of we kind of have in our minds that steer us away from those capital T truths. So we started off on the right thought process, but we sort of steered away. So we can always line ourselves back up and say, okay, well, it's not just these three that are going to get me um, that financial like the financial position that I should be in, or that I would like to be in, so I'm not stressed out and worried and stuff like that, right? So I can open the door for a little bit more. For example, I could be like a business owner or something like that. I could be like a manager at at a firm or something like that. I could be whatever. There are so many different other possibilities to achieve the same end goal of having financial like a good financial position in your life, right? So that's another thing that's one that I want you to wants to protect, and that is intellect. That with this correct intellect, you can choose between what's good and bad, right? You could choose what's right, what's better than something else. You have the capacity to do that, right? You have the ability to do that, and you're not happy. And then also when you interact, when you have a good intellect, then you're able to understand the implications of your actions, and so you're going to make better choices in life, generally speaking, right? But you're also going to have a better relationship with other people, because you're going to know how you're going to be more alert in terms of how what you're doing or you're saying and stuff can impact other people. So you sort of become more aware of what's going on around you. So like in a smaller circle, but also like in a broader sense in terms of society and so on, right? So you're going to take actions and stuff that are going to be good for you and so on, and other people around you. Now, so these five, I believe I mentioned all five of them. I don't know if I missed any, but one of them was Deen. Another one was like wealth and property and so on. Another one was lineage and honor, right? That's another thing. And then we also talked about intellect and life, right? So these are five that the Sharia protects. If we understand this, right, then we look at Islam differently, because a lot of times we have a different, the wrong perspective about Islam. We think that Islam is only a bunch of rules, and like it's restricting us too much and so on and so on, and that I want to do things my way and stuff, and like Islam is sort of becoming Islam is not that thing that's going to help me become happy in my life. Practical from a practical standpoint, it's not something that's going to help me, and like it's not going to make me happy at the end of the day. It's not going to help me make money and stuff like that. It's not going to get me to fulfill the needs that I have as a human being, which is to be respected, to have certain rights and stuff that are fulfilled and stuff, to make some money so I'm not stressed out all the time. We sort of disconnect Islam, and we make it sort of more of a spiritual thing. You just pray, read Quran and stuff. It's an investment for the hereafter and stuff, and Allah's gonna happy with you. But that's the end of it all, right? But it's not. If you understand these maqasid that we talked about, and these are just the basic level maqasid, right? Then there's the hajiyat and there's the tahsiniyat above that and stuff, like So all of these things, if we don't really get into these things, we sort of understand Islam as more of a spiritual thing and not like an actual practical thing, then that's when we get disconnected. And so a lot of times we do have this perception when it comes to working with our kids, working with whoever. We think that Islam is not that thing that they need to learn, because we think that it has no practical benefit in our life. And that's why, and I'm going to argue this, that's why we don't spend that much time on a daily basis learning Islam for ourselves and having our kids learn it on a daily, and I'm saying a daily basis because that's very important over here, right? We pray, for example, 5 times a day, let's say, right? But we're not actually learning. A lot of us don't even know the meaning of Fatiha or the tahiyyat that we say and stuff. We don't know what we're doing and why we're doing it, what we're saying and stuff like that, and how that's impacting us. We don't really think about that much. We sort of have this automated processes that are called prayers, right? That we sort of activate at certain times, and when we're finished with them, we go back to our normal routine and we start thinking about other things, right? So it's like automated, like when you're tying your shoe, for example, it's very automated, right? Um, uh, but that's just exactly how it works for us. And so we get disconnected because we've taken Islam as a spiritual thing, and this is our small t truth. But the truth of the matter is, right, the capital T truth, is that Islam is a framework of how to live life so that you can actually become happy and content and actually be satisfied in your life in a way that nothing else is going to make you in a way that nothing else is going to do it, right? So in this case, if you understand and internalize these 5 things that we just talked about, for example, that in itself is a great launching pad, because now you look at the world as opportunities and you're thinking, if Allah is encouraging me to make money, like that, then that means that every time I go to school, that's actually potentially, right, with the right intention, I could be actually getting good deeds for that. In fact, I become more motivated to go to school, right? I become more motivated to go to work because it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with. He wants me to do this and stuff, right? We tell our kids that, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to work. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to go and like exercise and stuff. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to do this and this and this, because these are good things that are beneficial to you, your families, but also as a human society, it's beneficial to everyone, right? And if we understand, if this is how we frame it, then instead of spending only Sunday school out of the entire week, sort of learning about Deen, uh, or letting our kids learn that, we're going to actually be the ones that on a daily basis are going to frame every day within the framework of Islam. We're going to our kids are going to wake up. The first thing they're going to remember is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're going to get excited and motivated. Right? This is what we're gonna feel too when we wake up and try to go to work and stuff, right? Instead of being all groggy and stuff and kind of like down and like start tired and like I don't want to go to work and stuff. The case of the Mondays, for example, or the TGIFs like moments and stuff, right? None of that is gonna happen, because everything that you do is gonna become it's gonna be something that you're gonna look forward to. You're gonna be excited about, because everything is something that is within the framework of Islam, and Islam then becomes is no longer something of just spirituality stuff, right? It's actually a practical living experience, right? It's something that I live every single moment of my life, and not just when I'm praying, when I'm automated, when I press the button play, and then I raise my hand and I say Allahu Akbar, and I start reciting whatever I memorize and stuff, right? Without really thinking about it. When I'm reciting, my mind is on something else. That when I'm going to finish prayer, what I'm going to do and so on, right? It's no longer going to become like that. It's going to become where I'm actually going to be thinking about everything that I'm doing. I'm going to look forward to my prayers and stuff like that. My kids are going to sort of understand that them actually, them playing sports is actually something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages, because that makes them healthy. And if they're healthy, then they're able to help other people. They're also able to help themselves, and they're going to feel good because their body feels good now instead, because they're healthy. They're not going to feel like they're tired all the time. They're sluggish all the time, and so they're not going to feel these kind of things. They're going to feel benefit in their body and stuff, right? And so they're going to actually look at these things as something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting them have a lot of fun and happiness and stuff, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to work more and stuff. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, money is good and stuff, right? They're going to start looking at everything in a more positive way. They're not going to look at it in a negative way that's been, or like a negative or disconnected worldview, right? They're going to look at it all positive now. I'm eating some healthy food. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to enjoy it. And in fact, the Prophet said, mentioned, among the things that he likes in this world was food, right? And so food was something that he enjoyed. And so, okay, I'm eating really nice foods and stuff like that this is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to enjoy. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا, right? That He is the one who created for us everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He is the one who created for you everything in the air, in the heavens and the earth, or in the earth in general, entirely. Everything is designed and made for us. So he wants us to enjoy nice foods. The Prophet ﷺ used to eat certain things and he would love it. He loved the shoulder meat of a sheep, and he would enjoy it. That was his favorite, one of his favorite dishes and stuff, right? And so he would really, really enjoy it. So eating nice food is actually something that is encouraged in Islam. Like, you're supposed to do it because it makes you happy, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that to happen. Because if you're eating like not so good food and stuff, you're not going to be able to sustain that. You're going to sort of like have to keep fighting yourself, man. You have to keep reminding yourself, okay, it's okay, it's going to be something good at the end of the day and stuff. It's like a constant struggle. But in Islam, it's not like that. Islam tells you, yeah, have good food, enjoy it. Like the Prophet ﷺ did. He was the best example for us. So enjoy it. So I know I went over it, because I got really into this today. But I hope it gives you an understanding of where our own um, adopted worldviews, our own adopted understanding of what truth, what reality looks like or should look like and stuff, right, is the cause of our stresses and worries and stuff, because it does not mesh with the reality. It's not fit with the reality. It's not reality. If I want to just become very individualistic, for example, it's not going to be sustainable. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not encourage that. In fact, he warned against that. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned the believer is the one who mixes. Yeah, the strong believer the believer that mixes with the people. That he mixes with the people, and he takes whatever harm or annoyance and stuff that they give him. He goes through that. It's better than a person who stays away from the people and he doesn't mix with the people, and so he doesn't get harmed by the people. So the Prophet mentioned that. So society and working together, the Jama'ah concept, right? Jum'ah comes from the same word. So it's when people are supposed to gather together and stuff. It's supposed to be a show of solidarity and unity and stuff, encouragement, because we get excited when we see people and stuff, right? When you have social events, you have so many people. If you have free food somewhere, people are going to be coming. Everyone sort of get excited about going there and stuff, right? Because Allah Subhanahu knows how people work, and so He knows that people get encouraged and motivated by these things and stuff. So inviting people over, visiting people and stuff. All these things are encouraged in Islam because Allah Subhanahu knows what empowers us, what makes us feel more motivated and encouraged and excited and so on, right? So Allah Subhanahu made those things be part of our deen. And sort of the Prophet sort of said, sort of like warned against the people that weren't doing these kinds of things, right? Or told us not to be like those people that are not doing these things. So, for example, if somebody, one of the rights that that people have on us is that if somebody invites you for like a wedding feast or something like that, then you should accept it by all means, right? Of course, if there's haram stuff going on and stuff like that, then and you can't really say anything about it and stuff. If you go, then you shouldn't go, right? But if you're going to be able to enjoy the good and forbid the evil, as they say, then you can go and do that and not just be like a silent observer and so on. So but generally speaking, all things considered, if you have a wedding invitation, you should accept it. If people invite you to their house, you should accept it, because it's supposed to encourage and empower societies and so on. So if you have this understanding that Islam is built on those things that you actually enjoy doing, then you're going to look at Islam completely differently. You're going to look at life completely differently. Then your guiding principle is going to be Islam, because you know that it has benefit for you exactly how you like it, right? Unless, if you want to have intimacy with somebody, because that's something that's a natural thing that Allah put inside of all human beings, right? They want to feel that they have a spouse or somebody that cares for them and stuff. They have this bond with somebody, but they also have this need to have intimacy, and being a little bit more specific or explicit over here. But I hope the messages get understood over here. That Allah Ta'ala has this thing that He has put inside of us, but at the same time, He has made a framework within which we can actually enjoy that experience and actually get good deeds for it. And we know from the hadith of the Prophet when the Prophet was giving some examples, and he mentioned even having intimacy with your spouse can get you good deeds. So the Sahaba were really surprised, but we're enjoying this and stuff, right? And the Prophet said, yeah, that if you did it in a haram way, then you would have gotten bad deeds. But if you're doing a good deed, then naturally you should, the logical conclusion is that you should get good deeds, right? Because if you did it the wrong way, you get bad deeds. So the opposite would be that if you did it the right way, you should get good deeds. And so that's exactly what happens. So you're actually enjoying things that you like, but you're actually getting good deeds for it, because it's a way of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala encouraging you to continue doing these things. You like that? Okay, there's a way to do it, and you're going to actually get good deeds for doing this. So keep doing this stuff, right? And so Sometimes if we don't understand this, then we sort of get disconnected from reality. And when we get disconnected from reality, we are the ones that bear the consequence of all the negativity that comes associated with it. We are the ones that sort of impose on ourselves, inadvertently, at least, right? The harms that are there from, like, stress, frustration, anxiety, and all that stuff. And I'm not trying to undermine anything. I'm not trying to say that the people that are going through these things are just like silly people or whatever and stuff, and they can just get over all this stuff. No, like when you actually get into that stuff, it's very dark. That tunnel that you enter is very dark, right? And you need to get as much help as possible. And it's not something that you should be ashamed of and stuff, because you're trying to get betterment for yourself. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ himself mentioned, it's more beloved to me that I walk with my brother in his time of need. Uh, it's more beloved to me that I do this than making i'tikaf in my masjid, in this masjid over here, meaning that Masjid al-Nabawi, for one entire month. There's different versions of this hadith, but the one that's authentic is the one that has 1 month in it. So imagine that the Prophet ﷺ himself making i'tikaf, right? That's a huge thing. The Prophet ﷺ making i'tikaf, and then it's like he's making it in his own masjid. That's another big reward, because we know that the masjid, you're praying one rak'ah or one prayer in Masjid al-Nabawi has a lot more reward than praying it any other place, except in the Haram. In Mecca, in the at the Kaaba, right? That's the most you can get. So we know that, and then the Prophet ﷺ is not just doing it for 1 day, 2 days, and stuff, but an entire month. So you can imagine that weight, that much reward that could come out, right? But he's saying that walking with my brother in his time of need is more beloved to me than doing that. So that huge reward, he's foregoing that because there's an even bigger reward than that. So the point over here is that when we understand this, when we understand that Islam is encouraging us to seek treatment, to go and work with each other, to help each other when in time of need and so on, then everything sort of like goes, it becomes different. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then is intending for you to be happy. He wants you to enjoy this world, right? He wants you to be happy in this world. He wants you to sort of be like a good position in this world, so you can be happy and content and all that stuff. And he intends for you ease. Yuridullahu bikum al-yusra wa la yuridu bikum al-usra. That he intends for you ease, and he does not intend for you difficulty. So this is the framework. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends for you. He wants you to be comfortable, relaxed, not have to worry about things and stuff all the time, not have bad experiences and stuff, not be ignored by society or something like that, but to rather be like a tight knit, always looking out for each other's society, right? The society that's always empowering each other and so on. That's the society that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to build with Islam, with the guidance that He has sent down, right? So this truth right here, or these truths, if we understand them, and this is what we internalized, then necessarily every aspect of happiness, every aspect of contentment will be satisfied, with this adherence, this guidance. But every deviation thereof is necessarily then going to mismatch from the reality of how we're created, and so whatever makes us happy and so on, right? All that is necessarily going to any deviation thereof is necessarily going to hamper that fulfillment of that satisfaction or that contentment and so on, right? And so that's where problems happen, that's where stress happens, that's where difficulties happen, that's where things sort of fall apart. With that, I'm not going to go more into details, inshallah, but I hope that gives you some sort of understanding of how to reframe everything, so that Islam actually becomes the framework within which you navigate your life, because of the benefits associated there, because what Allah wants at the end of the day. Allah doesn't need you to worship Him. It doesn't help Him at all, right? But when you worship Him, it actually makes you more happy. It helps you become more satisfied. Imagine if the world did exactly what Allah wanted. If parents were taking care of, and they grew older by their kids, right? Just like they took care of them when the kids were young, right? If everyone spoke nice to each other, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, قُلْ لِعِبَادِيَ الَّتِي أَحْسَنُ. Tell my slaves that they should say what's best, right? if people started saying kind things to each other, they were encouraging and empowering each other. They worked together to support each other. Like the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, how the believers are like, they support each other and reinforce each other, and he sort of interlocked his fingers. So every believer is like a support system for every other believer. Every believer is a motivator and advocate for every other believer, right? If people started doing these kind of, if everyone was looking out for each other financially and stuff, right? If everything was like that, imagine the society you would be living in. That's exactly, the feeling that you would have in that society, in that context, where everyone is like doing really well, right? Everyone is always looking out for each other. If anyone's sick, you're supposed to go visit him, right? Isn't that one of the rights that we have on everyone else? So why did Allah SWT do that? Because he knows that if a person is left alone, he's going to feel hurt. So Allah SWT made it a right for everyone else that they need to fulfill for this person, that they go and visit him, right? That's important because Allah SWT does not want us to be disconnected. So the rights that he has done is because that's exactly what makes that person happy. And so Allah SWT is looking out for individuals and societies as a whole. So imagine that society where everyone feels part of everyone, the rest of society. They feel part of a society, a group of people and stuff, right? They feel part of a society that's built upon looking out for each other and happiness. And the end objective is contentment and satisfaction and happiness in our existence. That's the end objective over here. Sometimes we sort of disconnect that and we think it's for the hereafter and that's it and stuff. That's true, it's there, but it's also supposed to start over here. One of the scholars said there is a Jannah, if there's a Jannah in this world, that if you don't have it, you don't get the Jannah in the hereafter. So essentially, you need the Jannah of this world to be able to get to the Jannah of the hereafter. And that comes from building that kind of society. That comes from having that kind of interaction with each other. And we always talk about the Prophet ﷺ as if he was like a distant person who, like, he wasn't really like a real, maybe it's a legend or whatever and stuff. And I say that we talk about him like that because we even though we say that we want to be like him and stuff, we don't actually do the things that he said to do, right? And so we sort of are treating him like that, like impractical person, right? He was the one who told us to be nice to each other. He's the one who told us to be kind to each other. He was the one who encouraged us to be like financially in a certain position, and so he's the one who told us to do all these kinds of things, right? That's through him is where we got the guidance, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that he was focusing on bi'idhnillah, under the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to build that society where people would actually be satisfied and content. They're not going to have stresses and worries and all these things and stuff. They're going to feel well connected with everyone else. They're going to feel happy and content. That's the society he was building under the with the instruction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the society that Islam therefore is intending to build. But we are the ones who are sort of steering away from that. We are choosing not to be that society. And that's where conflicts happen, because that guidance is supposed to mesh with our realities, who we are and what makes us happy, and we are the ones that steer away from that when we go away from that guidance. And so we are the ones that self-impose this stress and worries and negativity and so on in society. I hope that makes sense. With that, I want you to see if you guys can go and explore Maqasid al-Sharia a little bit, these 5 specific ones that I mentioned, and just see how that fits in your life, and how that motivates you, how that actually satisfies the end objective of Sharia, of these aspects of Sharia, right? How does that help you reframe your perspective on life? How does that help you sort of just kind of make it so that reading the Quran is no longer something that you have to push yourself towards, but rather you sort of encourage, you look forward to it, because you're like, what's the next thing that I'm gonna learn, that I know now is gonna be useful for me in navigating my life, that's gonna help me become happy, that's gonna help me become more connected, and I'm gonna feel welcomed in society and stuff, right? Feel like I'm an integral part of society. So what are the things that I need to know? What are the things that I need to do to become that, right? That is what you're going to be doing. And now you're going to be craving reading the Quran. Now you're going to be craving, you're going to be looking forward to praying. Now you're going to be looking forward to learning more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you're going to be, constantly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you're going to feel so happy. You're going to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that everything that He gave us is to help us feel good, not to help Him out, right? When you do that, when our kids do that, when our friends and families and stuff do that, then you're gonna see that change. So now you're not gonna have to tell your kids, pray, go pray and stuff like that. You're not going to have to do that now, right? You're not going to have to tell your kids to be nice with it. You're not going to have to worry about like all the stress of, you know, raising your kids in certain societies and stuff, right? You're not going to have to worry about all those things anymore. So that is the takeaway, inshallah. I want you to go explore that. That's also the homework. But the takeaway was, you know, that Islam brings everything that's beneficial to us, and it is aligned with whatever is whatever our disposition is. However, you know, whatever makes us happy and so on. And it also pushes away everything that's not going to make us happy. Anything that sort of makes us less than happy, Islam pushes that away. And so Islam necessarily is an advocate for us. It's necessarily the thing that helps us, empowers us, motivates us, and so on. It is necessarily in our best interest because it's aligned and it knows more about us. In the sense it comes from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, it counts more about us than what we have understood about ourselves as a human society, right? All of the humans, if they put it together, all the psychology and sociology and stuff, you put all the information that's collected and accumulated and stuff, whatever it has come to in terms of conclusions therefrom, Islam necessarily is far advanced from that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created us and He knew about what's going to happen in the future and He knew about what happened in the past and so on. So He knows all the details. So Islam necessarily is a source of understanding psychology and sociology and everything else. So we're already ahead of the game. In every society then, Islam is necessarily ahead of it. And it's necessarily ahead of what society is going to exist 1,000 years from today. And whatever human experience has been accumulated thus far, meaning in that 1,000 years from today, Islam is still going to be ahead of that. So imagine how far advanced Islam is right now. If in 1,000 years it's going to be still advanced, then today it's even more advanced, relatively speaking, right? In terms of the distance between what it is today compared to what Islam is at. If in the future 1,000 years from today is advanced, then today is going to be, relatively speaking, in terms of comparison, it's more advanced, right? So the point is over here that at the end of the day, we need to accept this, and this is the issue that we're going to talk about inshallah next time, is how do you accept the reality and let go of your accepted or whatever you've perceived as the truth, letting go of that. How do you do that? That inshallah is going to be our next topic, sort of taking that next step forward, right? And then sort of maintaining that, being sustaining that inshallah. That's going to be what we're going to go with inshallah. So with that, I know I went a lot over, but inshallah with this framework, now that you have this in mind, we can focus on what those truths are, capital T truths about life and what Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala wants you to do and why, and also like how to learn new truths, how to learn the capital T truths, so that you continuously are always ahead of the game, right? You're not playing catch up. You're not trying to figure out what needs to be done and stuff. You're not doing trial and error. You're always ahead of the curve, and so you're always aware of what to do in every situation that you come across. Okay, and inshallah, so when we get to that, we'll get to that in the next session, inshallah, hopefully. But that's what I wanted to focus on today. But now, from now on, it's going to be a lot more of getting a truth and applying it, getting another truth, applying it, learning how to do that. So you're going to sort of be like the example, or that how the saying goes: teach a man how to, or give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, then you feed him for a lifetime, right? So that's what we're going to focus on, inshallah. And with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude. And inshallah, next time and the other time and stuff, we're just going to keep it short. And I know that I mentioned that I was going to do that today, but I figured that this would be a good opportunity to go into details, so I wouldn't have to do it next time. And so next time, inshallah, we'll just jump into actually going into the truth and like navigating and so on and so on. So if anybody has any questions, you guys can ask. If not, then we'll go ahead and conclude, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.